Good morning, solo of the month and flute friends. Welcome to another group practice. And this month, solo of the month is focused on the Bach Partita in A minor, the second movement, the Corrente, which is such a great little lively piece in 3/4. So to get started, I've prepared just a little, very short technical warm-up that I'd like for us to cover together. And I'll do that as a share screen. So hopefully this meeting is on a screen big enough for us to see it. All right. Can everybody see this very short little technical warm-up page? Excellent. So the very first thing we see on here is there's no flats, no sharps in the key signature, similar to our partita. And it starts on an A, and it goes up raising the 6th and 7th scale degree, which is the F sharp and G sharp, leading up to the A. Coming down, we have the G natural and F natural. So those of you who are not taking theory classes, this is an A melodic minor scale. And let's start just simply by playing that A melodic minor scale. Let's do it all slurred. And if you'd like to join me, 1, 2, and 3. Now, last week I met with Teddy Huang, who is a Baroque flute traverso specialist, and she talked about some articulations that are used when she is playing the traverso, including doing a to-do, to-do, to-do. So as we approach the 8th notes this time, let's try applying the to-do articulation to the BC, to-do on the DE, to-do on the F sharp G, etc. So just starting to apply that articulation that we've been discussing this past week. 1, 2, 3, and... And just so we have it in our ear, let's go ahead and play the next two measures, the A, C, E, A, E, C, A, which is an A minor triad. 3. We're going to do a few more collections of these, and then I'm going to open up for people to discuss what it is that they're feeling. So let's do measures 6 and 7, which is that E minor 7 arpeggio, E, G, B, D, E. Let's first do it slurred. 1, 2, and 3, and... Let's take that exact same arpeggio, and this time try the to-do, to-do, to-do as we ascend it. 3. And remember, there was a third articulation. Well, there's several articulations that Teddy talked about. One of them was to-do-ru, to-do-ru. So let's try doing to-do-ru, to-do-ru, to on this. Again, to-do-ru, to-do-ru, to. 1, 2, 3, and... Let's try the exact same thing again. To-do-do, to-do-do, to. And Teddy suggested that we can also consider switching where we put the two T's. We'll do that on the next one, though. Let's go ahead and get through another one. Let's do the next one that has the G sharp raised. So here we have the E7 arpeggio, E, G sharp, B, D, E. Let's do it first slurred. So measures 8 and 9. 3. And let's try that new articulation, the to-do-ru, to-do-ru, to on this one. 3. And again, to-do-ru, to-do-ru, to. Notice how that kind of highlights those E's at the top and bottom a little bit more. And you're welcome to go ahead and play on for the A minor and then A7, the B minor and the B7. And I chose these arpeggios because there are arpeggios that we see in this piece of music. For example, if you were to look at, so we are in the third week of it right now, which is the last third of the piece. And my score, measure 44 to the end. And in my score, measure 45, beat 3, we have A, C sharp, E, G, which is what we see in measure 12 on our little warm-up. And in measure 47, we have the E, G sharp, B, D, which is the one that we just played. And then in measure 49, we have B, D sharp, F sharp, A, which is the last one that you see on this warm-up page. So go ahead and start playing through a few of those. But while we're having you all play through it, I'm going to ask if anybody would like to play out, and so that we can hear and talk about the ways that you're applying articulation to these more simple patterns. Anybody out there willing to unmute themselves? All right, Barbara, let's go ahead and hear it.
Oh, there we go. All right. It didn't
Awesome.
want to unmute. So I'm having a really difficult time with the roux. I don't know where my tongue is supposed to be.
Yes. And I don't really know for sure either. And I believe it's one of these things that we just have to imagine that each of us have a different shaped mouth, and each of us has a slightly, even if we're all native English speakers, Teddy did indicate this might feel unnatural for native English speakers to use the roux. But it's something that you can just start playing around with, saying the words to-do-roo, to-do-roo. I walked the dog this morning just before the meeting started, and I was walking around the neighborhood going to-do-roo, 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 to, and I was trying those articulation exercises, saying it so that way I might feel a little bit less confused when I play it. Do you want to go ahead and try one of those? And if so, which of the articulations are you going to play for us so we can all hear it?
Measure 6.
Measure 6, okay. Yes, and which articulation pattern are you thinking right now?
To-do.
Okay, great. Let's imagine a little bit more stress and release with a to-do, to-do. So we'll keep the rhythm even. To-do, 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 to-do. But for this articulation, rather than just doing two, the do is meant to have a slightly different quality, potentially a softer quality or a gentler quality.
Well, the tongue moves
To-do.
back.
What's that?
The tongue moves back for the do.
Mm-hmm.
Do. Yes.
To a little bit a softer place. So try that
Yeah.
again and see if you can emphasize the difference in quality between the two. So it's got more of a stress release type of a feel.
Okay.
That's starting to have some contrast, yeah. And she also indicated that
Go
Teddy
ahead.
also indicated that sometimes we'll end things with the tongue returning to its starting place. So if you wanted to doot, then you could have a stop note there too. That may or may not apply in many phrases, but that is absolutely something that she said we might sometimes do.
Okay.
Let's hear it one more time. Kind of press and lift. To do, to do. All right, great. So how's it feeling to try that right now?
Well, to do is something I'm more familiar with, um, so it feels okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
when I get into the roux that, or re, there's a whole bunch of different variations, but
Right. Good. So let's try doing one where you add that R consonant then.
okay. So to do roux, okay.
nice.
Yeah,
And
I, every time I do the roux, my tongue's in some different place.
I think it's going to take a while for your mouth just to understand how you want to say
Yeah,
that word. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But it's sounding really quite nice. There is some vibrato happening in your throat, which is not a problem, but it is sounding like you're stopping the air a little bit further back than the tongue. So maybe
Okay.
imagine that air column just being a little bit more continuous, and then the tongue, like if we think of just like lift of an airplane, the tongue will then just be able to move around in that air column with a little bit less resistance. That's starting to sound really smooth, yeah. And when Teddy demonstrated, she was going quite slow, but I imagine that she could also play it faster, and we'll use that more continuous airstream.
I would think
So
so.
some of these effects that we're doing with articulation as an expressive element are going to become pretty subtle when if we take it at a faster tempo too. So
Yeah.
that's sounding really good. I would say don't get in your head too much if Rue isn't feeling super comfortable in your mouth right
All right,
now. Just
don't get
start
in
trying
your
to
head too
make
much.
that part of your language.
Okay.
All right, wonderful job, Barbara. All right, would anybody else like to just do some of this simple warm up with us?
I'll do it.
Great. Was that Chris?
Yep, it's me. I'll do measure 49. I'll do the 2 do root 2.
Wonderful. Great. So I'm applying these articulations directly to the music, and that was 49, and that sounded really good. So how did it feel to two?
Um, well, it felt a little strange because, like everybody else, you're not used to the roux. But I noticed that the roux, when I do the roux vowel, it's more my tongue is going down further in the back of my throat.
You feel
So,
like the entire tongue shifting back?
yeah.
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 And again, also consider the air column creating a little bit of air pressure, like fluid dynamics. And so as we keep the air consistent, then the tongue is also going to be less likely to muscle back because it's going to just be able to float around and lift. But that sounded quite nice. And when you did that articulation, when you applied that articulation, Chris, which notes did you kind of feel like were highlighted within the measure or within the phrase?
Um, the roux. To
You
me,
felt like the
that's
roux was the
and the
strongest?
roux was the more highlighted um, note.
Play it for us again. And so I'm going to ask the gallery out here, which notes do you that bravo by the way, wonderful sound. Which notes do you hear as kind of feeling more significant when Chris demonstrated that as a listener?
The third note was where I noticed it the most.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, were you doing the roux on the third note?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first beat would be D sharp, E, F sharp. That's the note I was doing the roux on.
Okay. And did you do it on any of the other notes?
Yep. The second beat was the second A, and the third beat was the F sharp.
Okay. Can you play it again?
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It sounds really nice and lifted. Beth typed in that she heard the two notes coming out prominently, and I agree. I am also hearing the two notes come out. And I'm wondering, are you wanting the roux to come out, or are you wanting the roux to decay away a little bit?
Um, I'm kind of wanted to come out a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, and that if you're wanting to bring out the first and the third note, then a to do articulation might serve you fine. What with a to do ru, I think the purpose is to create chain like complete contrast, where the ru is going to be the most gentle of the three, at least as Teddy described. Before I continue on with that, because this is not my area of expertise, Is there anybody in our gallery today who does play this style of music frequently and can guide us or correct me if I'm misinterpreting Teddy's interview? Okay, let's go try that one more time, Chris. And this time, if you're going to use a to-do-ru, let's try to back it off just a little bit. So in 49, you had. To 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 to.
Okay.
Yeah, your roost still sounds kind of pointed. Let's just take a B. To do do. Yeah, and are you doing the to do root?
Yes.
Okay, maybe just a little bit less of that, just so you have more of the taper. Kind of a feel. Yeah, that's starting to have each one of those consonants is now starting to sound like a different type of playing, which is really good because then you do have the contrast of the three different sounds. Now go slow and try that measure again. And I think my roos are a little pointed now too. It's something I need to work on, or maybe I'll choose to work on it. Maybe I won't. We'll see after this week. But let's try that again, where you to. And in fact, before you play it, let's all just like hand gesture and say it. So Chris is using the to do ru to. So let's press into the T and kind of lift away for the do ru. Let's all try that together. To do do to. To do to. So we're giving a little bit more press to the two, and it gets us a little bit dancey, right? These they all are inspired by dance forms, so we may as well move a little bit too.
Okay.
Good. And also, we'll just try this on for size and we'll maybe change it later. At the slower tempo, will you try having the ru a little bit more connected to the do with your airstream? So it does sound like you're kind of stopping the air a little bit after the do. Just do the air without the flute for a second. Good. Now let's try it through the flute again. Keep the air column continuous. So it's just the tongue that's interrupting the sound. And even when Teddy demonstrated those more lifted sounds, that was because she was stopping the air with her tongue. To do root, right? She went back to the T. So the air column continues. Wow, that sounded really different again. How did that feel to you that time?
Felt really good.
Felt really
Felt,
good?
yeah, if the notes seemed more even.
And then when you were doing it that way, which way were you feeling the which notes did you feel like were kind of getting a little bit of emphasis?
Uh, the ruin too.
The ru and the two still?
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. And have you tried any other articulations in those measures?
I have tried the to do,
To do?
to do. Yeah.
All right. And you're enjoying the to do do?
Yeah, but I don't want to do the to do through the whole piece. I want to change the articulation up, in the
Okay.
piece.
All right. And John, I see that you have your hand raised. Question or comment? Just unmute
I
yourself. Love
think
to hear
John's
it.
on mute.
Oh, I got it. I got the mute off. I'm just wondering about the roux, and because normally we think of that as almost a rolled R, like it's almost like a flutter tongue. I wonder whether if we're taking it too literally, and it's just a very so you've got the 3 degrees, the to, the do, and the ru is almost like a breath attack. But does that make sense to you? So it's because we don't. Everybody's trying to do this. I'm not. It's too literal, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And so it's funny that you're going to say that you just said that, John, because the very next thing I was going to say after we did this little warm up arpeggio exercise is now that we tried Teddy's suggestions to the best of our ability today, using our native language, whatever that is, and trying to apply these articulations there. Let's let go of the need to feel like we need to do it one certain way, right? So I know that I'm trying to take it very literally because when I get introduced with something new, I want to learn it. I want to learn it right. I want to learn it the right way. Which is funny because as a teacher, I always remind students there are more ways to do things right than there are to do things wrong, and what's right for one person might not be exactly right for you. My face is shaped different, my tongue is shaped different, my language experience might be a little different. So that could all be playing into part of it. But I think the gesture that Teddy was trying to make with the 3-syllable or the 3-word phrasing, to-do-do, was to create press, lift, lift feel. At least when I was listening to her demonstrate it, that's how it sounded. So regardless of what we do to create that sound, I think that is a useful quality to be able to bring into this music. And maybe we ask, this is a tool called Challenge. The question is, this is a way of doing what? So Teddy's to-do-do was a way of bringing out certain notes in the harmony changes or melodic notes or creating some kind of interest through expressive articulation. And once we realize that is a way of doing that, we can begin to search for ourselves other ways of doing something similar. All right, great point though, John. Any other questions or do you feel satisfied right now, John, that like, yes, I agree. Let's not take it too literally.
Yes, I just have one. You'll probably get into this in the next sentence. Are we ever slurring? Do they ever slur when they're playing?
Yes, and again, Teddy is a person who studies this quite a lot. She, in her interview, indicated that slurring was absolutely useful, and you can decide how to do that. When we slur a note or a group of notes, if we are slurring 2, for example, the first of the 2 slurred notes is going to sound longer, more full to the listener. And so it kind of creates that stress release shape also. So in 45, 45 is not a great example, but I'm going to go ahead and go there. If I were to slur 2 in 45, it is a way of creating that stress release.
I was thinking more, is there, for example, the beginning of the partita, can we slur 4 notes in a row?
I think we can slur as many notes in a row as you feel comfortable doing. The couple of traverso players I've worked with are near. I think sometimes the articulation is to help because some of the technique of those cross fingerings is less smooth than our chromatic mechanism. And so sometimes notes are tongued just because they don't sound super as smooth with the cross fingerings to go through some of those fake notes. And when I worked with a Baroque cellist / gamba player, he said that slurring was okay, but his statement to me was slurring is fine, but only small groups of notes because his bow was short. So when you think of a modern day cello bow, they can get quite a few notes in a bow. But with the gamba bows being much shorter, he's like, I can only slur a couple of notes at one time. So those are a couple of thoughts that I've been imagining as I practice this myself. Any other thoughts out there about slurring since John brought that question up? And that is a great question. Nick.
Good morning, everyone. While I was at Peabody, I also had the opportunity to study Baroque flute with Gwen Roberts, amazing traverso player. And in doing so, every year at Peabody, we do a Bach marathon concert where the entire studio has to prepare one of the sonatas or the partita from memory and perform it during audition week for the prospective students. So lots of pressure there, and I've done my fair share of memorized Bach sonatas. But that's to say, in this topic of articulation, and specifically with John's question of can we slur, sort of the tradition in performance practice is anything in terms of intervals that are larger than a second, so even a third, you would articulate. Anything smaller than that, so a half step or a whole step, you can slur. So it's fair game to slur the beginning of the Corrente until you get to that largest interval at the beginning of the second measure. Those are the Baroque performance practice standards. So that would give you some guidance also on where to add slurs. The other thing that I wanted to add, sort of backing up in this discussion about articulation, and especially this tu du ru concept, is that I think as, again, English-speaking people, we get so hung up on the front of these consonants that we think of the tongue as being very hard, and therefore the articulation gets really hard. I think we have to think more of a European style, even though we can think Italian or French, very French, right? Our flute playing is much these days rooted in French history. So if we can think of not saying rue with like a really hard R, so that we do feel the back of the tongue going down, like kind of southern, almost like rue, rue, like where you're sort of gripping in the mouth for the R. If you can think about a soft R, like even if you're speaking French, dans la rue, rue, it's almost like a really soft R, almost like an L. And that, I think, is going to help with this concept of rue, not thinking of so much with the force of the front of the tongue as our traditional English R like a pirate, but more it's almost like an L, but we think of an R. So I kind of imagine this to be a very soft R, almost an L, and that will help, I think, achieve this articulation a little bit better. The other, I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, the other thing that this helps to do is really go after this Baroque articulation concept called inégal, which is this unequal articulation, which gives these really long 16th note passages a lot of variety, as opposed to égal or equal articulation. So there is a lot of history steeped in this style of articulation, this inégal articulation using tu di ru, because even trying to say tu di ru, you can feel how uneven that is, as opposed to taka 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 taka, or daga 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 daga, which is very equal. So there are some of those concepts that we can try and translate to our modern flute from this Baroque performance practice. So if you're still struggling with that R concept, try that really forward French soft R, almost L shape for rue, and that might help.
And I'm far from a hip person, but there are a couple of spots in the manuscript that are marked with the slur marking, right? That opening phrase, and then there's no measure markings in the manuscript, but later in the piece there are a couple of spots where they are marked in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is to leave it up to the interpretation of the performer, but we also have to remember they were writing with like pen and quill, like quill and ink or whatever on parchment and stuff like that. So sometimes I imagine some composers just didn't take the time to do things he assumed people would do naturally. And with just kind of bouncing off of what Nick said, another place that when I was a young flute student, where my teachers always had me slur were neighbor tones. I don't feel that way necessarily now, but there are quite a few neighbor tones, and it does sound nice to slur many of them. So starting in measure 44. So by neighbor tone, I mean we have one note and then either the step down below it or the step up above it. It's neighbor and then returning home. So like the B flat, A, B flat, the A is the neighbor, the lower neighbor, and measure 45, and the F natural is the neighbor to the G, F, G. So those are things that I was when I first started playing Baroque music as a kid. That's kind of one of the rules my teacher told me. Nick, having studied Baroque music more like actually as a performance practice, is that a rule that you heard, or is that something that came up during any of that study?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were just talking about. So that interval is not larger than a second, right? So anything that's smaller than a third. So if we were looking at that same measure, so that's a second. It's smaller than a third, but the B flat to the G, that's a third. So that's where you would articulate.
Right. But along those lines, I guess I specifically mean, was neighbor tone brought up as something that got extra attention or was more commonly slurred versus like slurring to that? Right, because those are all steps going up the scale to the little neighbor tone.
I don't remember. I'd have to look through my binder, which is somewhere.
All right, great. More thoughts on slurs from our gallery of amazing flute players. Just because we keep saying English language, this is Flute Solo of the Month is an international group. This meeting doesn't tend to get a ton of international folks because of time differences, but I'm curious, is anybody out there joining from somewhere other than the North America today? No? Okay. Great. Any other thoughts or questions about slurs? Nick, do you want to, was there more that you just kind of wanted to talk about in general? Any more performance practice tips that you have for us?
I think something to keep in mind too, not maybe about articulation or anything, but or performance practice, but maybe just the composer and the style a little bit too, is that we don't have, aside from the flute sonatas and the Partita and the Brandenburg Concerto, and I think there's a few cantatas, a lot of flute output from Bach. It's a lot of string writing. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when we're playing this type of music, even though it's written for flute. I tend to think of articulation and phrasing a lot in terms of if it were being played on a string instrument. So what kind of bow am I using? Am I using a down bow? Am I using an up bow? What part of the bow? Am I at the tip? Am I at the frog? Things like that. So I think especially for these really long movements, like the first movement, the second movement, where we just have this barrage of 16th notes, especially where string players don't have to breathe. Well, they do have to breathe, but not while they're playing their instrument. It's really important for us to think along the lines of, I think, length of articulation, quality of sound, things like that we already do, but in a different way as maybe a string player would, and then try and emulate that somehow on the flute. It's a big challenge, but it's a fun challenge. So think about that when you're working on this piece. I think the other thing to think about are the stages of articulation, and by that I mean the front of the note, so the attack, right? And then the middle of the note, which is our sustain, and then the end of the note, which is how we release the note, right? So that we were practicing a little bit of that in the tu de roue exercise, but I think if we can think about that and keep that concept of the stages of articulation also in this piece, if you decide to play the whole partita, there's a lot of opportunity to experiment with all of that, but not just thinking of articulation, or as I call it, diction, as the front of the note, but that there are these three stages: the front, the attack, the middle, the sustain, and especially I think we all forget the release, the end of the note. So those are just some things that I would invite you to think about as you explore the music of Bach.
Go ahead, John.
just so is there, I have trouble muting myself in life too. Uh, so is there, with the three articulations, to, do, and ru, is there any relationship, the ending of those? Is there anything built in? Is the last one, is the ru tending to separate because it's something, there's a shorter note coming up after that usually, or
I go, Nick.
No, you go.
I believe it can be either or, and part of why I want to specifically say that is because Teddy also mentioned like toot and ending with the T returning, or root and the ending with the T returning.
oh,
So when you're wanting to do that, you can add the return of the T, and
but you
so
can do that with any of those.
you can do that with any
Yeah,
of them,
right.
and you can also create lift. And I'm kind of regretting when I was having us go to do ru that my hand was pulling back, because really what I as a flute player, I like to think of my air always going forward, and so it's more like, and I love to think of like lift of airplane. Like the two is like where the landing strip is, and or the takeoff runway, I guess. And then like there's just like little bits of lift, and then the release is an upward and away forward type of thing. So I can't quite make my hand go forward enough, but like it would continuing to move forward that way. And we need to acknowledge as flute players that that lift also helps keep us from going flat at the end too. So keeping that airstream forward and imagining it lifting up and away helps keep the pitch from dropping at the ends of our releases. And at some point, we just don't have sound anymore. So if we taper enough, or if we lift enough, it'll sound like silence without actually stopping or breaking the air column. Deborah.
I'm sorry, I had to unmute. Dr. Matthew, as like we've talked about this piece, I'm revisiting this piece after, many years. And I studied this first with Irvin Monroe, principal of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, for many years. And let me tell you, we all have access to computers. I mean, back in the day, I had to go to the library and look things up in books. But, sometimes these can be really academian challenging for even degreed people. It doesn't matter. I think the more research we take on as a player of any level, I think it's just a wonderful way to do. And for gosh sake, ask a string player. And then we have the marvelous Mr. Nick here with the Omaha Symphony. Yay! Bravo you. So it's really, we have so much knowledge and information, and don't get overwhelmed. Just, do a little research, the more you know. Yay. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. And I think that goes along the lines of there's so many ways of doing something right. And so if you listen to a recording and you're like, I'm really inspired by that interpretation, just ask what it is that they're trying to do. We don't have to know exactly how they did it. We can figure out ways of making something feel or sound similar too. And it is worthwhile doing a little bit of research. May as well read a chapter of a book or something like that and then give it a try. As long as you were saying, Deborah, as long as we don't get like stuck in the academic part that we lose the joy of making music. So with Bach, it's such a big name. Bach's name carries so much weight of importance, and we think of all these important stylizations, and it can be very intimidating to play. But Bach, like any other composer, just wanted to create connection through music. And if we want to honor Bach, yeah, let's look at some ornamentation, let's look at some articulation. But to honor Bach's true intent is to connect through music. And that's something that is easy to forget when we start getting burdened by the performance practice or the skill sets or whatever that might be going along with it. Bach was probably happy if people played things slow, as long as people were playing his music. He may have encouraged people to go faster, but I'm sure he didn't say stop playing my music. You don't have the technique for it. He was probably saying, yeah, I'm glad my music is reaching you in this way. Chris, were you waving at me?
Yeah, this might be more of a question for Nick. Since we're talking about articulation, like if we want to use, excuse me, different articulations, is there a guideline of like how long we play one articulation until we change to the other articulation, or can we do one articulation, one measure, and change it the next?
That's a great question. And the answer that I would give you is that articulation was used as a form of ornamentation, right? So you can change it up. You can, especially because we do have the repeat, right, for the first section and the second section. So articulation is a way that we can ornament. So you could totally sort of play a game with your listener and be like, oh, can you catch the differences of articulation that I'm going to do the second time around versus the first time? And you might play with length of articulation. You might actually change the pattern that you're doing in some places. So yeah, you can absolutely run wild with the variance of length and placement and things like that, because articulation was a form, and still is today, of our way of ornamenting this beautiful Baroque music. Great question, Chris.
Yeah, and as articulation as a form of expression, the question is which note do I want to bring out and how do I want to do that? And then you get to decide. You get to try on a few hats or a few, styles of articulation and see which one fits you best for the effect that you are wanting in that particular place. Great question though, Chris. Other thoughts or questions from the group? Would anybody like to demonstrate part of this? And thank you so much, Nick, for being here today. Nick is also the technical guy today. So I just, yay, Nick, yay, and getting over a cold at that too. So glad that you're here with us today, Nick, and we'll send well wishes your way to feel great by your concert tonight. Okay, so with that in mind, yay, we get some thumbs up for you. I don't know if you see that on your side or not, but people are clicking that button. Let's hear somebody play part of it. It can be this ending part that has been our goal for this week. It can be the beginning if that's what you are more comfortable or focused on. Any part of it. Anybody have a flute handy? That'll give us a little demonstration. Trying to see everybody at once because I'm sure that you are all waving your hands, right? Everyone's like, hands are like out of the camera sight. So, okay, nobody feels like playing out today. I'm not going to force anything to happen that isn't wanted. But this is a place for us just to kind of learn and grow together. And whether that growth is from you doing something so awesome and so prepared that we're all inspired, or that growth is, hey, this is something I find hard. Let's try. All right, I see John and Deborah have their hands up. Deborah's already unmuted, so let's start with her, and then John, we can go to you after that. How about that?
42 just jumps out at me. Measure 42.
Okay.
I don't know how far you want me to go.
I want you to go as far as you want to go. Beautiful demonstration, Deborah. Thank you so much. And I love the energy that you put into that at 42, that low D sharp. It was very present and very nice.
Thank you.
Articulation-wise, the group may have noticed, it sounded like Deborah did a lot of slurring of her stepwise scales. In 42, that descending scale. In 43, you did tongue the C, but then slurred down the scale. And that sounded really nice and fluid and flowy. And that gave us that option of hearing that. And it still fit within Nick's suggestion of tonguing things bigger than a step. So really, really, really nice in that section.
Well, that's just, thanks to Mr. Nick and, being orchestral, player as he is, the years of studying this piece, it's funny how orchestral players have the same opinion. So it's a group. I love it.
Now, just to double check something, can we go to measure 50 and just double check there? I don't know if it was a G sharp thing or a different note thing, and I don't want to get picky about playing the right notes.
It was a flippy of the finger, Dr. Matthew.
A flippy of the finger. All right. Well, let's just take it slower too, because I think you did the ascending slurs there, which it did sound nice. It brought out the when you slurred up. But just to think of Nick's rule of not slurring notes larger than a step, can we bring out that descending scale in a different way besides slurring there?
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a C natural in there, and let's do tongue the G sharp too. So maybe slur the second G sharp. So maybe slur the first three notes. And then return to your articulated for that G sharp, since the B to G sharp interval is larger than that step.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Will you tongue that G sharp? Just for now. If you decide later that you don't want to do it, not going to hurt my feelings or Nick's, I don't think, right?
I don't want to do that.
Good. And then are you tonguing the growing interval?
Yes.
Awesome. Let's hear just right there. Nice. Yeah. And so what articulation are you thinking as you do that growing descending scale?
What was I don't even know what I was doing. I used to slur groups of two, but that's a no-no. I bring out more of I tongue the lower note definitely to bring that out. E, D, C, B.
That's coming through very clearly. I was just wondering if you were still slurring to the G sharp or if you're doing a very legato tongue.
Very legato tongue.
Very legato tongue. Yeah, it sounds nice, and it did highlight that descending scale. And then measure 51, I think, and 52. Well, gosh, a lot of this I think you could approach in that same way. So measures 50, 51, and 52 all have that pattern where we have these hidden descending scales. Well, I guess the others are not scales. The G sharp, F sharp, G sharp, E, and the C, B, C. But those low notes are kind of the notes that have the interest. And so whether you bring them out by slurring them, which is what you were doing before, or bringing them out by giving them that more legato tongue compared to the repeated pitch. Because if we hear too much of the repeated pitch, I'm not saying this to you because I know you know, but as a listener, if people are bringing those out equally, then our ear just begins to hear whatever that repeated pitch is. If you're playing in a cathedral too, or a place that has a lot of reverberation, that becomes especially apparent when people are like pounding out those, either the pedal tone's a low register or just like in this case the intervals are going below it, so it can become a little bit dominating as far as what we hear as listeners. So thank you for demonstrating that, Deborah. I think you did a fantastic job of showing us that movement. All right, any other comments for Deborah or thoughts? Okay, well, John, let's hear you.
Ah,
There it is. The more we, if we come here every single month together, eventually we'll all figure it out. I'm still learning too. I was really proud of myself for sharing the screen today. For sharing the right screen.
I'm just going to do a bit of the beginning of the Corrente, and yeah, I mean, I'd have to mark in one question up front. Do When you're learning, I would be marking all over the place, whether it's to, de, and I've got really no compulsion to use ru. I don't know where I'd use it. Anyway, this is just the beginning.
I'm sorry to stop you. I'm trying to like make eye contact with Sean and Nick out there. Are you guys hearing him too, or is the original sound cutting him off? Okay. Do you see the original sound for musicians option?
No.
No? Okay. If it's not something that you can click on and off during the meeting, it's one of the settings that you have to set up before. And once
Yeah,
you set it up
to.
in your main settings, it should be there forever.
And the main settings is on the Zoom app.
On the Zoom app, yep, there's the option to enable
Yeah.
original sound for musicians. And then in each meeting when we play, actually, mine has just been on. So I guess Zoom isn't making us turn it on every single meeting anymore. Or
Mine
is it
is
because I'm
stuck
using
on
your
there.
Zoom today, Nick, and you just had it already on?
Sometimes if you click on the status bar with all the options and hit more and then audio settings,
Yeah.
sometimes you'll be able to change it.
Yeah, I'll try
Yeah,
it for next time.
Apps moved it recently, so now you have to go to your icon in the app
Well,
for your
and I did
profile
that,
icon, and then it's under settings in there. It
but
used to
it
be down
was
under
it was
more.
already selected for me, so I don't know. But
Anyway,
All right, Sean. So
that's
it's in a different place now. So we'll have to come up with a new. I'll need to write a new reminder of how to do it. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So John, you're going to look for that for next time. You said.
Yeah.
In that case,
Yep.
would anybody else like to play today, or are we just actually going to end in under an hour, which has never happened before? I don't think.
can
So
I?
there's a shortage of volunteers. I have a flute, so
Oh, let's hear some, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't started on the last segment yet. I was going to record that this afternoon. Where does our last chunk start at?
44 in most editions. After we cadenced on the E. Or half cadenced.
Original sound on, you can hear me? Most of the notes.
Gorgeous, of course. And Sean, can you talk us a little bit through of your approach as far as the choices you made for articulation, and even I don't know if you were consciously deciding where to breathe, or if you were
My
just
first
reading.
notes of the day, so I breathed
First notes
where
of the
I
day.
needed to breathe. So
Give us a
yeah,
few. Talk through us.
in this pass, I'm just articulating every note, and I'm going to decide later where I want to put the slurs in. So I'm probably going to slur my groups of three. I'll do a lot of 3 and 1. But for this pass, and maybe for one of the repeats, if I take the repeats, I'll just do a straight articulation across.
Oh.
this isn't the copy I usually play from, so all my markings are in the other one.
Yeah, and sometimes it's fun to have that fresh take on something, especially things that we're revisiting from.
Especially after I realized my old professor had put them all in pen.
Ooh. I was telling the story throughout this month about how I am using the same edition that I had for two different teachers, and one of my teachers like went through and erased and crossed out the first teacher's markings, saying, "No, this is all wrong." And I don't think either of them are wrong, and I don't think either of them are right. But it's just kind of funny how aggressively sometimes our teachers mark into our music. And so in the case that your teacher was using pen, your teacher really meant for you to remember those articulations.
Yeah, he must have really been intentional about what he wanted me to do there. So,
so Sean, as
Very
you're practicing this, you
territorial.
said you're going to start all tongued and then add some slurs in.
yeah, I'm going to start all tongued and add slurs. So I'll go back and probably. And those I'll just tongue all of those to bring them out.
Yeah. Lovely. And I love also how you made a few of those notes just a little bit longer and then drifted away from them. So it had a very dreamlike quality to it as you're playing it, which is
when those
another.
lines split, I kind of imagine it as keyboard, left hand, right hand.
Yeah. So that sounds like another way of doing it right, because if it sounds good and feels good, it's right in my book, right? All right. Any other thoughts from anybody about Sean's playing, or any questions for him about the choices he is beginning to make?
Sean, at measure 57, how are you? I had posted a question about this, but how are you grouping those notes in your
Oh,
head? In your
I
head.
think when I played it in the past, I did. So I'll probably do something like that. Although, hearing how the larger intervals would have been articulated, I might just mix it up. Something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really liked
So
you.
what I'll do is I'll play it a few ways. I'll listen to my playback and decide which one I like. Stick with that.
And what a great word to use, play, right? I'll play it a few ways. So that's great. To me, what you did sounded really neat, because when you slurred the three scale-wise notes, it did have that forward movement to go to the next beat. So that had a really nice effect to it also. So once this meeting's over, that's how I'm going to play it a few times. Because when I was trying to live in the world of the articulations based on my 1 hour conversation, which is not even that long study, with Teddy, I was like, none of these articulations feel right for me in that one particular measure, or those, I guess, kind of 2 or 3 measures that are very similar like that. So I think this is one of those situations where I'm just going to add the slur because I can, right? Is anybody out there going to get sued if we play the wrong articulations? No? Is anybody out there going to get hurt if we take a breath where we're not supposed to?
Bach will survive.
Bach
whatever
will
I do
survive.
to it.
Bach will
It
go
sounds
on.
absolutely fantastic on her traverso with the articulation patterns. It just really works there.
All right, wonderful. Any other questions or thoughts from the group?
I have a thought. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Um, I've been practicing the ghost duet part to this with Jen, and the other day I was practicing and a light bulb went off from back in my college days, which is 50 years ago. My teacher told me to think of Bach's compositions as a conversation between two flutes or two people. And that measure that you were just addressing, if you think about it in that way, you'll find another path, because if you say, okay, one is one thing and one is the answer, then you can change the tone color to make that more interesting and more fun to practice.
Yeah. Would you like to demonstrate your thought of that, Carolyn?
No, because I haven't played the actual part, but I can a little bit maybe at the beginning of my goes. The other thing I did was I put a purple line under the things I wanted to be in a darker tone and a yellow line above the things in the brighter tone, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. But right at the beginning, and see, I haven't even warmed up yet, so I was golfing this morning.
Oh no, and Carolyn, it sounds like we're getting stuck with the original sound not
okay.
coming through too.
Never mind then. But that I was just sharing my idea of how it made the practicing more fun for me.
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of some of like the virtuosic music that we've played in the Romantic period, where we had like a one of the voicings that we wanted to bring out as melody, and then other notes that we wanted to bring out as harmony. So you can certainly change your tone density or tone color on the notes that you want to bring out. Like what we were talking about with Deborah bringing out that scale descending, almost feels like it's its own path or its own kind of voice. John, you've got your hand up again?
Got it. Yes, in that vein, right off the beginning in the second bar, you've got the octave displacements. Is that almost like a question answer thing, or that's a bit too obvious to do in that?
I don't think there's such a thing as too obvious. I think if that's if that's what you're wanting to show, then I think that's
well. It's got you've got in the second bar, you've got the A to the G, then it goes down to the F natural, and then it goes down to the E and D at the end of the bar. There's a line there that just seems contrary to the top of the line. So anyway,
I conceptualize that as a separate line, right? That's the left hand, right hand concept that I like to use. So
yeah,
I would even practice those independently. In fact,
you've got the call, the higher voice, and then you've got like a little the grumpy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could think of it as kind of being conversational that way. Of course, I'm exaggerating the rhythm just so there's two voices, but that could be a fun way of approaching it. And if it brings enjoyment to you to try to think of it that way, then well, go for it. I usually make up for things like that. I usually make up sentences, and then so I hear how the two people are talking. And they're always about food. I'm very food motivated, just like my dog. So like when I see the AG, I'm thinking pizza. Not normally when I play this, but because you just said it as a conversation, I'm like, oh, I guess it is lunchtime, isn't it? So yeah, cool. And so searching for those places, we all know Bach was a genius. And one of the things that like my teachers always said is Bach could hide stuff in his music that like could be fun to try to find. This is before they had like, I don't know, games on their phones and social media to distract them, and televisions and soap operas and I don't know, whatever else it is that we distract ourselves with these days. Like if you were just playing Bach over and over again, you would say, what can I find in it today? And in this case, John, I think you pointed out something really fun that we can find right off the bat in the beginning. All right. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments from the group out there? It has been wonderful to spend another Saturday morning with you all today. And thank you for your participation in Solo of the Month. And keep posting even one measure, even if it's your measure of like, hey, I can't play this measure well, please somebody give me some tips. Any kind of post is a great post in Solo of the Month. We don't just want polished performances. We want people playing flute. And that, whatever that means to you, is great with us. The next several pieces of music are available. So we have the list up through, I think, June. Next month, we'll do the Gluck from the opera Orfeo Euridice, that minuet and spirit dance, which would be lovely. Um, After that, does anybody have the list handy? I know that the moquet, the third movement of the Flute de Pan, is on there. I think that's the I think that's May,
What
and
day
then
is the April class?
it'll be whatever the third Saturday is. I think.
Okay, cool.
Let me double check that. Um, let's
Yay.
see. So 4/11. Yes, it'll
18.
be on April 18th.
Thank
And
you.
that'll cover Gluck. And again, of course, we want to say thank you to Flute World if any of you are purchasing the music. Coming up, we have the Gluck, the Moquet, and then Stamets. Use code Allison2026 and you'll get 10% off any. It doesn't have to be these pieces of music. Any sheet music or accessory from Flute World, the code works for 10% off. So we're grateful for them for showing support to our group and trying to keep things available for us. And those of you who have ordered from Flute World in the past for this group, do know that I am now giving them the list of repertoire far in advance so they can have their orders ready. What had happened in the past was I would tell them, like, I don't know, on February 26th, what we were going to start doing on March 1st. And apparently it takes a little bit more time than that for a company to change their purchase order from the publishers. So I apologize if you had any delayed music, but now they're getting those lists quite early. Also, then we'll have to think about what we're going to play in July. So if I have a list of things that you all have emailed me or requested in the past. You're welcome to keep making suggestions, and we'll put it on the list, and the little advisory committee will go through that list and pick some things out. So I'll see you all as you post throughout the rest of this month, and then hopefully we can all come together again on, I think it was April 18th as the next one. Ciao.
Bye.